A lot of people around the world have negative sentiments towards the United States. And there is a reason behind it. There are a lot of people that do not know that the United States is an empire. But since the World War II was over, the United States has engaged in multiple and many wars, again, in different regions of the world in order to keep its hegemony. Now, at the beginning or at the end of the World War II, for example, the United States used nuclear weapons, right, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And if you dig into this incident, in this particular incident, you will come to the conclusion that the United States back then didn't need to use this nuclear weapon. And they use it for sadistic reasons. But this is for another video, we can address it. Later, during the Cold War, the United States also engaged in the Korean War. And this war has resulted in the death of 3 million people. The vast majority of them were civilians. And the war was between 1950 and 1953. In 3 years, 3 million people died. Just try to calculate that number in your head, like 1 million people per year because of this war. And then the United States engaged into another war, which is the Vietnam War, also during the Cold War, also to fight against the communism and the communists. And this war resulted in between 1.3 and 3.4 million casualties. These numbers are not a joke. These are big numbers. And now you may understand why people or the general masses have some negative sentiments toward the United States, but also the governments, why they're trying, for example, to have nuclear programs or nuclear weapons to protect themselves against this, for them to have the same fate. And then the United States gave unconditional support to Israel, which until this moment occupies large swath of Arabic territories. And then the sanctions against Iraq, for example, which has killed over 500,000 kids because Iraq was not able to secure milk and medicine for the kids. And when Madeleine Albright was asked about these sanctions, she said, the price is worth it.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And, you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it.
So it's not like the United States committed a crime and then their leaders expressed regrets. No, they know that they committed crime and they're proud of it. That's the real problem. And then the United States invaded Iraq, right, in 2003. And this war also resulted, and up till this moment, around 2 million casualties, and millions of people are refugees around the world. And then the United States developed its military strategy from a conventional warfare into an unconventional warfare, and launched a regime change war in Libya, and launched a regime change war in Syria. In Libya, it turned into, from one of the most developing countries in Africa, into an open-air slave market for black Africans. And in Syria, 500,000 people died. And when the Syrians resisted this regime change war and they won this war militarily, the United States imposed sanctions to strangle the Syrian people. The United States occupied the oil fields of Syria in the eastern shores of the Euphrates. But most importantly, which is the topic of today's video, the United States burned the wheat of Syria, the food bank of the Syrians, also in the eastern shores of the Euphrates. Now, let's address this because the United States is trying to poison now the Syrians. And you may ask, how the United States is trying to poison Syrians? I will tell you. So there is a center in Syria called the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, ICARDA. I remember this center because it is close to Aleppo. It's like, I think, 20 kilometers southern suburbs of Aleppo. And when you're driving on the highway to Damascus, for example, you can see it with your bare eyes. And this center is, its job is to develop seeds and genetic codes for the seeds for the most important crops that humanity consumes in order to make them resistant against droughts, climate change, and diseases and other problems that they could face. So in 2014, when the war was raging in Syria, the scientists or the people who work in ICARDA, they managed to smuggle they smuggled the seeds of the most important crops on Earth with its genetic codes, which are meant to preserve and to keep the crops resistant to disease, pests, and climate change. So this is the job description, right? And they managed to smuggle some 116,000 seed samples. That means 83% of ICARDA's total holdings. They smuggled it outside of Syria. And to be honest, if I were the researcher, I would maybe do the same. So I'm not gonna say anything negative. Maybe they did the right thing, maybe they not. I'm not here to judge. Back then, maybe that was the right thing to do. Now, one of the most important seeds that they smuggled outside of Syria was the wheat. Okay? And these seeds that they smuggled, it solved the problem of the wheat in Africa. The wheat in Africa is suffering from a disease called stem rust. Similarly, the United States has not taken over but also managed to get samples of this seed, the wheat seed. And the United States solved its own problem in the United States thanks to the seeds of Syria. The wheat seeds of Syria saved the American wheat. And you can search about this and you will know that what I'm telling you is the truth. Now, how the United States thanked the Syrians for developing these genetic codes for these seeds that are resistant to diseases, to climate change, to drought, and also to pests. You may say like the United States exported wheat or seeds of wheat to Syria, right? Well, maybe, but with some problems. First, the United States burned the wheat of Syria, and you can go on Google and search for it, or on YouTube you will find tons of videos. The wheat of Syria is being burned in the eastern shores of the Euphrates, where the Americans occupied that area, right? And what they did also, the US aid recently exported wheat seeds to the city or the governorate of Hasakah in northeastern part of Syria. And these seeds appear to be poisoned. So this wheat arrived illegally, or the seeds of this wheat arrived illegally from Iraq, and it was distributed to the Kurdish militias, and the Syrian government managed to get samples of these seeds through their people there. And these seeds came to the government-held areas, and the Ministry of Agriculture tested these seeds, and they found out that some of these seeds, not all of them of course, some of these seeds are infected with wheat wart nematode. This is another name of a disease. It's called wheat wart nematode. And the Minister of Agriculture in Syria says, even if few, 1, 2, 3 seeds are infected, it will lead to the infection of the entire crops in the region. So I'm asking myself now, has the United States not tested these seeds before sending it to Syria, or they did it on purpose? And judging from past experiences and what the United States did and continues to do in Syria and in other regions of the world, it gives me the impression that the United States is doing this on purpose in order to strangle the Syrian people, in order to destroy the Syrian economic system or the Syrian economy, in order to make it dependent on the outside forces instead of being independent, self-sufficient, as it was the case before the war, when Syria used to export its wheat, export its product to all around the world. People do not know how Syria was strong in agriculture, how strong it was in manufacturing small and big products. Some people think that Syria was like regressive or backward. No, Syria was a developed country. And I'm not saying like it was China or Japan, no. But at the same time, you used to go to Europe and check the products of the clothes and you would see the cotton is made in Syria, for example. It was world-class materials. And it happened that, unfortunately, this regime change war has destroyed almost everything. But what do you think? Do you think that the United States has sent this wheat, the poisoned wheat, infected wheat, the seeds to Syria recently on purpose in order to poison the Syrian people, or maybe just to destroy the Syrian economy once and for all? Let me know in the comments below. I'm reading all your comments, guys. I really appreciate your participation and posting your opinions on Syrian analysis. I also learn a lot from you. And if you're new, please consider subscribing and hit the like button. It really helps me with the algorithm of YouTube. And if you want to support an independent work like this, you can become a patron. Link in the description below, and see you next time.